So actually a topic, the first comment to the survey is, even though strategy might not be the main concern of everyone, all these other things are somewhat related to strategy and not completely independent. So what I want to talk today about is really giving you some of our research, sharing some of our research with you on how we see companies developing strategies that work and help to close the strategy through execution gap. Because what we observed in the last years is that business strategy is actually in a pretty big crisis. And we surveyed like roughly 3,000 senior executives, and these were some of the statistics that came out, and they should be very concerning to everyone who spends a lot of money on strategy, on the implementation of a given strategy. So only more than 50% actually think that they don't have a winning strategy. 2 out of 3 think they don't have the right capabilities to actually create the value they envision to create. 4 out of 5 think their strategy is actually not even understood by their own company. And 9 out of 10 actually think that they're missing out on major opportunities in the market. So this is not a good state that we see, and it's across all kinds of industries. And very often, when we looked at what are companies actually doing, it sounds pretty good at first, right? When we look at these 5 things that a lot of companies engage in, you wouldn't think much is wrong with it by just looking at these things. But what we observed is a lot of times you see unintended consequences happening when you pursue these of the strategies. And what we then did in the next step, we looked actually at really companies that were successful over many years and found out what are 5 things that they are actually doing instead of these major 5 things, and I'll walk you through those in the next 45 minutes. So the first one, focus on growth. Second is pursue functional excellence. Third, reorganize to change. Go lean, and become agile and resilient. So what can be wrong with these things? A focus on growth can literally trap you in a growth treadmill, right? Ever chasing opportunities, interesting growth areas, and kind of getting, just distracted by it and caught up in a lot of different pursuits that don't lead anywhere at the end. Pursuing functional excellence can lead to trying to be the best at everything, but at the end failing. And I think a lot of us can relate to that on a personal level, right? It's the same when you think about where do you want to focus your personal development. You can't be excellent and a genius at everything, but each of us has like certain strengths that they can actually focus on and really set themselves apart. It's very similar for organizations as well. And then reorganizing to drive change can kind of also catch you up in a treadmill, basically just organizing and reorganizing the whole time. And some of you that might have experienced organizations that do that a lot, people just lose belief in it, right? They are like, oh yeah, now we do a reorganization. The time we get used to it, we will basically change it again. So people don't, they take it for granted that it won't last. So why should they invest in it? Why should they follow through? Then go lean. You can also go too lean, right? Cutting costs just at all kinds of ends and going to the extreme. And then becoming agile and resilient. Yesterday in the Textile 4.0, we talked a lot about Scrum and agile development. It's very similar there as well. Agile does not mean flexible, so it doesn't mean you should change the direction at every opportunity that's presented. And that's very similar with strategy as well. If you constantly react to your competitors, if, like as Mark said, or just react to market changes, you kind of lose your own profile. So what do we see successful companies doing instead? They commit to an identity, and I will show you some of the examples in a short video after this slide. But they take a point of view and they take a stance on what do they want to be known for, what is their play in the market. And then what they're also really good at is thinking about where do they want to excel, and then translating the very strategic perspective into the everyday and really closing this gap. They are also aware of their culture, the cultural strengths and weaknesses, but they play according to their strengths. They don't try to change everything, but they put the work in to find out what are the strengths that actually help me fuel and accelerate my strategy. Go lean. Instead of that, they really think about where are the areas that we should cut cost because it's not differentiating, and where are the areas where we should maybe even in a recession or in a downturn put more money on, because this is really something that will set us up for success in the future. And then fifth and last is like, shape your future instead of chasing the market all the time. So I thought these things probably make sense, but they're still pretty abstract. So I thought we can take a look at some of the examples of the companies we looked at. And then in the next minutes, I will go through basically each of these 5 and give you some more information of how we see that come to life as well.
Our new book, Strategy That Works, reveals the formula for success. 5 unconventional acts the world's leading companies use to win.
Strategy That Works is all about closing the strategy through execution gap so that your company can create the growth, profits, success, and sustainability that you're looking for.
Stop chasing growth. Invite it. Define yourself by what you do, not just what you sell. A truly differentiating identity is built on bespoke, difficult-to-build capabilities. Your competitors can't buy these off the shelf, so it gives you an unbeatable growth engine. Take IKEA, from one store in a Swedish forest to the world's leading home furnishing brand. It has always stayed true to its identity, creating a better everyday life for the many people. Everything IKEA does, from its deep research to understand how people actually live at home, to its frugal, self-pick, self-carry, self-assembly model, is designed to deliver on the promise of who the company is and what they do best. Stop focusing on functional excellence and endless benchmarking. That will only lead you to the same place in the market as everyone else. Start blueprinting and building a handful of unique cross-functional capabilities that actually deliver your strategy and drive your profits. Then scale them across your entire organization. Think about how Spanish clothing brand Zara has turned the fashion industry on its head. It perfected amazing capabilities in fast, fashion-forward design and rapid response manufacturing. This allows Zara to deliver an astonishing 36,000 new designs a year to more than 1,900 stores around the globe. Stop fighting your culture. Start putting it to work for you. No culture is perfect. The key is to identify and leverage the parts that work in your favor. Activate the critical few behaviors and traits that drive your success. This will help inspire every employee to help execute your strategy. Brazilian cosmetics company Natura does this beautifully. Its corporate culture celebrates relationships with people and nature above all else. This helped attract 1.5 million sales consultants, brand zealots who sell door to door and build relationships with millions of women across South America. The result? Natura is now the region's largest beauty company. Stop cutting costs across the board. Start driving supercharged growth by cutting costs strategically. Most companies waste 20 to 40% of their budget on things that have nothing to do with their strategy. Instead, invest this money in your unique capabilities and put it to work to fuel your success. That's what Cemex did when it had to survive the 2008 financial crisis. There was immense pressure to cut deeply across the board, but instead they made dramatic cuts in certain areas so they could keep investing in the critical capabilities that would fuel its future as a solutions provider. For example, it improved its ability to help lower-income families build homes. It extended its infrastructure design services for local officials, and it worked. Cemex is now a global leader in the industry. Stop constantly reacting to market changes. The best way to own the future is to shape it yourself. Gain privileged access to your customers so you can discover what they want, even before they know. Make sure you constantly advance and evolve your capabilities system. Realign your industry around your strengths and push the market in a direction where you can dominate. Starbucks is a great example. We thought we just wanted coffee. CEO Howard Schultz knew before we did that we wanted a third place beyond home and work together. Starbucks took the market in a completely new direction, and with 22,000 stores and counting, it continues to dominate the coffee and community space it created.
Strategy that works is a practical roadmap, a new way of doing strategy. It's opposite what most companies do, but all of our research proves that it works.
Strategy that works.
Perfect. So I hope these examples brought it a little bit to life from different industries, but I thought it actually illustrated the concepts quite well and gave you an idea about how companies, successful companies, put that to work. And here are just some statistics why we should actually care about building a strategy that works. It's like when we looked at these companies that are coherent in their capability system and the way they interact in the market, we actually see that they're a lot more successful. So they're growing faster than their peers, and they're also more profitable. And also when you look at the M&A deals and the premiums they get out of those, we also see a big benefit for the companies that are actually coherent. So it's actually worth to put the work in, even though it's not easy or quick, but the statistics and the data suggests that the reward is also pretty big. So now I want to go a bit deeper into each of the 5 acts and just give you some guidance around how we usually help bring that to life with companies we work with. And thinking about committing to an identity, we see 3 building blocks that really determine your right to win in the market. The first one is the capability system. So we heard already in the video, like a capability is basically something that's not easily replicable, that's not easy to copy. You can't just purchase it. It's really something you have to build, and that really sets you apart in the market and helps you execute. So in the Zara example, for example, their supply chain that really enables them to do this rapid manufacturing cycle from spotting a design trend to really executing it within days to bring it into the stores. That's one example of a unique capability that has helped them set themselves apart. But then it's also about what we call the way to play. So a deliberate approach of thinking, how do I show up in the marketplace? How do I want to create value for my customers? What kind of business models am I engaging in? These kinds of questions. And then also products and services, like what do I actually offer? And how do I basically bring these capabilities to the market and position products and services that my customers want and that help them in their daily lives. So by looking at all of these 3 things and determining a perspective on that, that really helps us develop this coherent pictures of like where do we want to go and how do we build this right to win in the market. And for like actually looking at this, we're looking externally but also internally. So you need to have a good understanding of the market and the market dynamics and your customers, of course, to determine what's the right answer for a lot of these things. But you also need to be honest with yourself and look internally in the company and understand where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, what are the assets, tangible or intangible, that I can get to work, basically. And we see companies starting this journey of really developing this coherent strategy at very different points in their success or unsuccessful stages. So some companies start to think about strategy from a point of crisis where they see whatever we do, it's not working anymore. So Lego is, for example, one of the companies, while they always were beloved by the customers and had really good sales, they were really losing money. I think I read in one of the statistics back in 2004, they thought they are burning $250,000 a day in value, basically, just because they didn't have a supply chain and the operations under control and aligned. But then also other companies like Starbucks, they saw an opportunity in the market that was unserved, and they had a dream to basically fill this marketplace, and they started to think about a strategy and how they bring this vision to life from basically a not in the market yet position. So really different triggers, but no matter when you start thinking about strategy, you and the executive team basically need to be in agreement if you want a quick fix, right? You just want to get over the next quarter and have a solution that helps you get there, or do you really want to invest long-term in building differentiated capabilities that will help you and the company to even succeed maybe long after the executive team has been around. Translate strategy into the everyday. I think that's something a lot of companies struggle with. It sounds easy, but of course, if it would be, everyone would be doing it. So how are we usually working with companies to help them crack the code on that? So one is really designing this blueprint of these capabilities, but not only from a vision perspective, but really thinking down to the last individual and hierarchy level. How will this capability flow through my organization? What does it mean to have exceptionally good supply chain? What does it mean for my different functions? What does it mean for my different job profiles? What does it also mean for my incentive systems and the way I reward and hire people? So really this holistic view on what are the different building blocks to make this work? And then go into building these capabilities. And while you can't buy capabilities, you can buy certain skills and capabilities or strengths that are complementing yours and that you can recombine then. So sometimes you bring in outside talent, or you can also do some mergers and acquisition to fill a gap in your current portfolio. But a lot of capabilities you can also grow and groom internally. So that's really up to you to decide and to analyze, is that something that a capability that you want to have and you don't have, and then really thinking about what's the best way to get there. And then last thing we call take it all to scale. So really making sure it's consistent across the globe. And I think a company that took that to the extreme in positive way was Danaher with their production system and their business system. It's very famous. A lot of companies have tried to copy it. A lot of companies have analyzed and basically learned it. And this is just the statistics about their market capitalization across the last years. And I checked this morning, actually, they're currently at 98 from 60 in the last, I think, 5 years. So their growth journey is actually continuing and continues to be very impressive. And while Danaher buys a lot of different companies, they basically bring their business system to all of them and have a very proven way of helping companies succeed with their strategy and following through in the market. So it's a very interesting company and approach that they took, and very successful, so definitely worth to dig in a little bit. But they really are like the role model for translating the strategy into the everyday and helping, they basically developed a very repeatable model to do that. Yeah, we already looked at that, so I won't repeat that after looking at the video, but just some of the capabilities, the deep customer insights, the fast-forward design, rapid response, and then also being globally consistent and persuasive in the branding. And then the way to play is very clear on being a customizer and an innovator, and really bringing trends to people at very reasonable prices that they can afford, with a differentiated products and service portfolio that matches the needs of the clients that they identified for themselves. The next one, put your culture at work. I think everyone who has worked in change management or in big transformation projects knows how tricky culture can be. It can really help you and fuel it, but it can also be a big obstacle if it's maybe not well aligned with where you try to go, or especially when we think about digitization. It's not necessarily that people don't want to embrace it, but a lot of times it's just very new. It causes also fear because people don't have the skill set. They don't know what it means for their jobs in the future. So I think culture, especially in the context of digitization, is an important thing to consider and to take some deliberate focus on. And what we see is that cultures of companies that are successful, they basically inhibit these three key traits. So they managed to create a really good buy-in across the organization for the strategy. That means they were able to articulate the strategy in a way that people understand it and that it makes sense to them, that they can understand what it means for themselves, no matter what kind of hierarchy level or role they are, because this is a prerequisite for basically this buy-in and this emotional commitment. It's also creating mutual accountability. So in cultures that are very high functional, people actually keep themselves accountable, and you don't need necessarily just rules and regulations and incentive systems to basically reinforce the behavior you want, but people are actually committed to holding each other accountable. So if you think about a company that has like a fail fast culture and wants to foster that, basically if you fail in one of your projects, your peers would basically, help you learn from it and have a positive approach to that instead of stigmatizing you or like basically, thinking you're unsuccessful. So that really shows like how you can also basically fuel this strong cultural traits in an organization. The last one is collective mastery. So it's really the 1 + 1 is 3 thought, that once companies come and like individuals come together in like this alignment with the strong culture, they really can do more than when you have individuals that are not aligned in culture. So these 3 are basically really important, or like what we observe in working cultures. And how they get there is very often to think about not how to change their culture, so not change management, but basically how to find these parts of your culture that are actually helping you to activate your strategy. So some of their cultural traits, if you dissect it and let's say you sit down with your executive team or your leadership team, and you think about 10 things that make up the culture of your company, you probably find things that are like not so good or you wouldn't like to have necessarily, versus other parts of the cultural traits can be very inspiring and already very strong. And then what you basically want to do is pick these, maybe it's the top 3 or the top 4 traits that you actually believe are the critical few to help you in your journey for the strategy. And then think about how can we reinforce those? How can we incentivize people to inhibit more of these core strengths versus the other behaviors that we want? And kind of by that, leveraging already what you have, which is always easier than replacing it or changing it. And that also helps you bring grassroots initiatives, basically that come from the bottom up, and combine them with like the top-down initiative of driving like certain culture in your company. So I think that's personally a very interesting approach. I mean, in our projects, especially a big transformation, we work a lot with change management, and I think focusing on that approach really helps you to do that a lot smoother and accelerate the journey. Then cut costs to grow stronger. This is actually a very passionate topic for us at Strategy End. So we have also a concept that we coined Fit for Growth, and that's very much related to that. What we mean with Fit for Growth is really think about the areas that help you basically position yourself for growth and find money to invest in these initiatives, no matter what your current position is, by looking at like parts in the organization where you spend money, what's maybe not differentiating or not optimized yet. So some of the myths and the facts that we kind of observed in terms of cost management, it's like cost is an expense. But cost at the same time, it's also an investment, right? If you would not have cost, you also wouldn't invest into anything. So it's important to also look at this from this angle. Benchmarks are valuable, but they can also be a trap. Because you always basically, if you get to benchmark level, that just means you're finally as good as the others you compare to. A bit what Mark said before, right? If you're chasing your competition the whole time, you have to wait for your competition to make a move. So that's kind of the same thought here as well. Then frugality and growth are opposing objectives. Definitely not, right? You can be very frugal in one area and drive growth and invest in another. So don't like put yourself in this corset of thinking I just have to do the one or the other. Then the fourth one is across the board cost cutting is most effective, which is also not true because some of you might have experienced that in their organizations already. If you cut costs too much in some areas, you also just disable them, right? Or you make it really hard for them to function. People if they are understaffed departments, they might just get into troubleshooting mode the whole time and nobody can step back and think about the long-term optimization or success. And that's kind of the spirit behind there. Really think about, definitely don't cut in the areas differentiate you so that you then lose the competitive advantage in that area or the strengths that you already built. And when we look at what companies are currently investing, like usually what we say is like a good mix of your spend should be 40 to 60% should go into what you believe are your differentiating capabilities, the ones that you have or the ones that you build. Then there are certain table stakes that you will need to spend. That's usually 15 to 25%. Then we have certain things for lights on, right? Like if you have a building, you need energy, you need heating in the winter and things like that. There are just certain things that are non-negotiables. And then a lot of times they're like these not required that you can cut down or you should cut down to the zero as much as possible. Basically things where you don't really know why you invest, but someone approved the investment request and that's why money is being spent. And when we actually look at a company at the beginning of a transformation, you would be surprised how many of these initiatives you find. And when you question like 2 or 3 times, like, why did you invest in that? Why is that important? A lot of times people can't really answer the question. So these are usually good areas to think about freeing up some money that you then can invest into your capabilities. And Cemex, as you saw in the video, actually did that very well. I thought it was very interesting because they actually, in a time of crisis, they moved out of their key business, which is just building products, which is very undifferentiated in general. But they thought about how can they add services and build relationships in a different way by also basically adding some consulting services or developing tools that can help the people who want to build houses use their products, basically be more successful and have like an easier way to do that and help them basically decide how to best use the product. So I thought that was also a very interesting way to see while they were cutting costs in other areas, tried to optimize sourcing, supply chain, and all these kinds of things. They also invested in things that really helped them set apart from the competition. Then the last one, shape your future. So don't chase the market trends, but really develop a perspective on where you want to go. Here, you can see we're really very convinced that these capabilities are something very important. So although this starts with recharging your capabilities, constantly investing in them, innovating them. What's setting you apart today doesn't mean it sets you apart in the future. Also here, context of Industry 4.0. In this world that we live today, innovation can happen so quickly and it can come from directions that you didn't even anticipate. And it can overtake you and just create a whole new marketplace. So we saw in the statistics before that a lot of the tech companies are heavily investing also in innovation in the textile world. We see that in a lot of other business areas as well, where all of a sudden companies you didn't even consider as a competitor are all of a sudden taking maybe just the relationship with your customers away, maybe even develop products or services that make your own products obsolete. So you need to develop this deep understanding of what's going on in the market, what is the innovation that's out there for the next 5, 10, 20 years, and how could that possibly impact me, my capabilities, and how can I use this knowledge to then think about how can I build on this position of strengths and further develop it and make it, so to say, future-proof. And yeah, then also create demand. The Starbucks example showed that very well. Like, we thought we wanted coffee, but at the end we wanted a space to hang out. And I know, for example, my parents love Starbucks, not necessarily because of the coffee, but in Germany, usually you get kicked out after you had your first cup of coffee, and then, you know, someone will come with the bill and they want to free up the space. And basically, Starbucks just lets them sit as long as they want, right? You can hang out there, you can just enjoy, you don't have to consume necessarily. So I think it just filled the gap for a lot of people, and that they didn't necessarily anticipate when you would have asked them. And I think that's also the old story of Ford when he asked people what color of the car they would like to have. Basically, it's not only, customers don't always know what they want, or like you want a faster horse instead of a car, right? And this is also a bit the world we're in today, and to the degree that you can create this demand and at least actively think about it, that can really help you shape your market for the future, and also to disrupt your competition at the end. And thinking about realigning your industry, that's of course a difficult task, but what we see in today's world with digitization is as well ecosystems and partnerships and alliances are becoming very important. And by becoming a strong ecosystem and partner, you of course also extend your influence and help like set the tone in an industry and set trends, and kind of emerge as like this super competitor who also draws on a lot of the capabilities of other companies in their partner network and ecosystem. So what do we mean with become a super competitor? So it's really the companies that are very consistently successful in making their strategy actually survive the chasm between strategy and execution, that are really able to follow through, that manage to translate it into concrete actions, and they see their value proposition come to life and be more successful. They can invest, they find the money that they need to invest in their capability systems, but they also become better at doing what matters, and they learn how to better focus on what's relevant. And they also make better decisions regarding acquisitions because they know what they're looking for and they have a perspective before how it would fit into their portfolio, so to say. And a lot of times these are the companies you look at and you're like, my product is maybe equally good, or I also know the same customers, and you can't really explain why they are so much more successful. But a lot of times it's like this consistency in basically the strategy execution that we see as like one of the reasons. Good. Then we thought to close it off, we would also look at basically the leaders of a company and take a look at what do people think, how good are they actually in strategy and execution. And when you look at the statistic here, just checking how effective are your leaders in the organization in terms of strategy and execution, only 8% of the leaders got the stamp, so to say, that they're good at both. So, which is usually, it's pretty common, right? You can't necessarily be excellent at everything, but you should be aware of, also as a leader, where your strengths are and what's more your focus. Are you more like an execution-focused person or a strategy-focused person? But then also think about how to create a leadership team that's balanced and can basically address both of these elements that are important and have to come together at the end. But I thought that was actually pretty interesting as well. So just to close off, like a quick test that you can do just now or later when you get the slides, just think about, are you actually ready for a strategy that works? So are you already clear about who you are as a company and how you choose to create value for your customers? Would stakeholders, internal and external, give the same answer if you ask them? And you can do that test, just grab a few people that you meet at a coffee machine and ask them. Then translate your strategy into the everyday. So have you already identified distinct capabilities that work and that help you create value? And do you have a plan for how to innovate and to keep them advancing over time? Do you consider your company culture something that's positive and that actually helps you achieve your objectives? And are you clear about how you want to leverage and scale up the positive effects of the culture across your global organization? Is the majority of your expense budget invested in what you think makes you different? And do you have aggressive cost targets to reduce the expenses in non-critical areas? And do you even know what they are? So one of the trends that we see on a technology level at the moment, especially in the US a lot, is robotic process automation, which basically helps you to automate a lot of the really standardized processes in an organization. Lots of time in the front or back office, but we also see it now coming more and more to operations. And that's, for example, one area where a lot of companies spend a lot of time and talent that could be deployed somewhere else in a lot more meaningful way, because who enjoys like doing these reports every month manually? It's not a very interesting task, right? It's like usually a lot of manual work that, could be automated, and then you have these people available to also work on some more interesting and differentiating like tasks and areas. And for shaping your future, you can ask, do you have privileged access to your customers and to meet their needs better than others? Or are you driving change in the market and shaping your future? Or are you more driven by others in the market? So these are just some examples that can get like kind of the thought starting. And before we get to the Q&A, I actually want to show you just a quick like link here. We developed that actually just to help you also go through these questions in a bit structured way. It's called the Strategy Profiler. It's on our website, so you can actually answer some of the questions, kind of like what we went through right now, and it will give you a sense of where we think you fall into terms of strategy and where you are with your capabilities. So it can just be interesting for like, you know, getting some sense of where you are, and maybe do it with a few of your colleagues. We always found it very interesting to do with our customers. Good, then any questions or comments? Would be interested as well, like does that resonate with people, or do you have a different opinion?
Any questions? Maybe we could do some hands up. How many of you actually go and practice this? Do you think you'll go back and work with your teams and do some of this in your office? Oliver, come on, yeah, you're thinking you will probably, no?
It's too scary to look in the mirror.
You would probably? Okay, we've got a few here. Anyone else? Okay, because when you were doing the presentation, I was thinking it's mainly probably our ability to innovate is more around the impatience of a cultural organization, because if you're too impatient and lose your view very fast, then probably you're not going to succeed. Is it?
I think impatience is like a symptom usually that we see of not being clear where you want to go. So, I mean, usually if you're very clear and you have a very appealing vision that everyone thinks it's worthwhile achieving, we see usually the company having the long breath, so to say, to follow through with like maybe tedious infrastructure changes that help you set up for the future. But if it's not clear where you're going and you don't really know why you're going through the pain, that's usually when we see people just getting impatient and then changing directions and not being consistent in the way they try to execute. So yeah.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, perhaps we'll take a coffee break, and Juliane is around, so if you still want to have a conversation, you could carry it on. We will reconvene in half an hour and then move on to our next presentation by Sriram from Codes. Thank you.